Welcome to week 4 of You Matter. In 1 Kings 18 through 19, there is a story of Elijah. He's basically been living this quiet, remote life, and God tells him to go see King Ahab. He's back into the public eye. God wants him to end the drought that was happening at the time. Before he does, God wants all of the people, all of Israel, to know who God really is, and he is the only God, and there aren't any other gods. And he's like, okay, cool. We're both going to offer a bull, mine as a sacrifice for God and yours to Baal, this false god that they were worshiping at the time. We'll put the bull on this altar, and whichever God sends fire down from heaven, that is the one true God. And it says this about the prophets of Baal: there were no voice, no answer, no one paid attention. And it's Elijah's turn. He prays, God answers him, and fire falls from heaven, consumes the offering, the altar, until everything is gone, nothing is left powerful. Then all the people, of course, we're like, oh, he is God. Elijah's like, no kidding. And he cuts off all the heads of the prophets of Baal because, hey, a bet is a bet. Then it starts raining after 3 years and 6 months. It finally rains. He tells Ahab, ride back to the city because there's going to be so much rain, he won't be able to soon. And then he actually picks up his man dress, his robes, and he runs back, as the hand of the Lord was upon him, to the city before Ahab's chariot even gets there. He outran the chariot. Chariots were known to go as fast as 35 miles per hour. He had to run at least 15 miles to beat this chariot there. So he's literally a stud. He has this amazing victory, massive win, and something changes for him. We get to 1 Kings 19. Ahab tells his wife Jezebel. She threatens to kill Elijah. He runs away, scared out of his mind. He runs into the woods, sits under a bush, and he asks God, saying, just kill me, take my life. What happened in those 3 verses that changed Elijah from the man who was so confident in God that he was standing up to hundreds of men with swords and asking God to call down fire from heaven, to running for his life, terrified, hiding under a bush, wanting to die? I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any reason for Elijah's depression. Many of us can relate to this. We can be so confused about why we feel the way we do. We're depressed and we have no idea why. We just can't explain it. People are like, so why are you feeling like that? And we're like, I don't know. I have no idea. I just know that I am. I don't know why. And it makes us even more overwhelmed and makes us think that maybe there's something wrong with us. And it seems to get worse because people are just like, you shouldn't feel like that. And we're like, thank you. I appreciate that. It doesn't mean anything. I don't know why I feel depressed. Maybe something's wrong with me. Whatever the cause of your depression is, it's normal to be depressed. It's okay to struggle with depression. You are in a place of hopelessness. When you're hopeless, it makes you depressed. It's actually normal. Elijah's feeling depressed. There is no hope of the future for him. God is not angry with him. God does not blame him. You know what happens next for Elijah? It doesn't make any sense, but it helps. He takes a really long nap, and God gives him some really good food. That's probably me 80% of the time. I'm like, I just need some really good food, and I need a really long nap, and it helps. Did it make everything better? No. But how interesting. God is like, oh, you're running away, Elijah. Here, let me give you some food to help you. What? But when we are depressed, we sometimes think God is angry with us. When it comes to Elijah, God is not angry with him. He does not blame him. So many times, when we fail or when we fear, we are so much harder on ourselves than God is. And we think we have to do something crazy to God's favor back in our life. We don't know for sure, but Elijah goes on this journey, and I think he's thinking to himself, he wants something to happen. He goes to this mountain. He's searching for a spiritual high. He wants to meet God in a new way that's going to give him strength to keep going. He travels 250 miles to the Mount Horeb, which is actually the same mountain known as Mount Sinai, which is also the same mountain of God that God met Moses and spoke with him and gave him the 10 Commandments. So will Elijah see God the same way that Moses did? And if he does, will it even change him? God gently helps us to begin to deal with our emotions. In verses 9 through 10 of 1 Kings 19, it says, then he, Elijah, came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? God is not mad. He's meeting Elijah. He then gives Elijah the mountaintop experience that Elijah thinks he wants, that he thinks he needs. But this is what happens. In verse 11, and God said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Elijah didn't come out of the cave for the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire. He has seen that before. He already knows how powerful God is. He just reminded an entire nation of who God is, only to forget himself. He doesn't care about the wind, the earthquake, or the fire, so God meets him where he is at. And when he hears the sound of a low whisper, he comes out of the cave, and God comes to him, and he gently says to Elijah again, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" If you're hurting, God is not angry with you. He's not disgusted with you. He's wanting to meet you where you're at and say, "Hey, what's going on? What are you looking for? What do you think you need?" And some of you might not be ready to open up about what is really going on. Not ready for God to meet you where you are at. You know what Elijah wasn't either. Yet, after all of this, he answers with the exact same answers earlier. He tells God, "I'm still struggling." He's still in the same place, fighting the same battle, in the middle of the same struggle. And even after this long journey, all he's reminded of is this truth: he was never alone. Something powerful happens with his attitude, never changes. Even when he's struggling with depression, God still has a purpose for him. Even while you're struggling, you still have meaning. God tells Elijah, you're going to anoint a new king, a new priest, a new prophet. God is not done with him. God gives him a renewed sense of purpose. Inactivity often feeds depression, and it can seem so hard to do anything in the middle of it. He doesn't have any sense of what he can do in the future. When we are depressed, it is really hard to even picture ourselves in the future because we feel hopeless, hurting. God gives him a future, and it sparks hope. God looks at Elijah and says, "I have a purpose for you in the middle of your pain, in the middle of your depression, in the middle of your anxiety. God has a purpose for you. In the middle of your heartache, in the middle of your troubles, in the middle of your loneliness, in the middle of you feeling like you don't matter to God, to people in the world, he says, "Child, I have a purpose for you. I have a place for you to go." God calls you to himself, especially when you're hurting. You matter in the world. Every life has a purpose, and every purpose matters. What are you going to do about yours?